Okay, so, um, sorry, just let me get this right. There you go. Okay, there, I got it. So, I just want to read John 16:13 again. However, when he is the Spirit of truth has come, he will guide you in all truth, for he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears. All right, that you must keep in mind. So let's anyway carry on. Ruth 2 verse 6. So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, "It is a young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab." So the Hebrew word for the man in charge is Nar foreman. He was responsible to supervise, supply provision for the reapers and pay them at the end of the day. Right, verse 7. And she said, "Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves." So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, "You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young woman. This is when we should say the fix is in. She has found favor in his sight." Why the young woman? Because they were widows, they were older, and men didn't find them attractive. So the men in the field would usually, the older woman would be openly, they would go and have sexual intercourse with them, rape them or whatever. But the younger women, they'd get into a lot of trouble if they'd done that, because they were still had a chance to be married. See, they don't see sexual intercourse like us. The younger women still had beauty, so they could still attract men. That was the whole thing. But Naomi, Ruth is she's not that old, but she's been married, and she's obviously in the field as a foreigner and a widow. So she would be open game between the young men. So she found favor in Boaz's sight. The invitation is to glean in his fields for the 2 seasons permanently. She is thus free to continue through the barley harvest and also the wheat harvest that is coming. Verse 9, "Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young men not to touch you?" That's what he's saying about the young men. "And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn." So he's putting his authoritative stamp on her, basically. But she must stay in his field, because if she goes to another field, she might not find the same favor. She was free to follow immediately after the servant girls, where the pickings would be the most numerous, and his intervention and provision on her behalf. See, the picture you get in here, she has not only found favor, but she's also caught the eye of Boaz, and he stamped her. He's put a stamp on her. He's busy telling his people what he wants him, or what he wants them not to do. She fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, "Why have I found favor in your eyes that you should take notice of me, since I am a foreigner?" There's a Hebrew play of words in this sentence. It means you have noticed the unnoticed. And obviously grace is the basis. This is the answer verse, and you must take note of this answer verse. "And Boaz answered and said to her, It has been fully reported to me." All right? All we know in the Bible is, there's no other explanation. All we know is he spoke to that unnamed servant. He's the man in charge. And this man has told him everything. He says it has been fully reported to me. And he goes on to tell her, since the death of your husband, how you left your... He absolutely knows everything. He knows the whole story. So obviously they've got this reputation as they're back in Jerusalem, who she is and that. But the servant goes on to tell Boaz everything about her. And this is amazing to me, because this isn't our Holy Spirit, our unnamed servant. He tells that to Jesus, because this is in the fleshly realm. But this is a spiritual... you could foment this in the spiritual realm as well, because this is a position that is happening. And you'll see, Nana, that you've done for all your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and have you've left your father and your mother. Now that's very strange. And the land of your birth, you have come to people whom you did not know before. Now that leave your father and mother appears in Genesis 2:24. Also in Ephesians 5 verse 31, therefore a man shall leave his father and a man. This is not a man in the Bible. Is the, how can I say this, the sexual orientation. So it's a man. Shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. The wife is also, that's a sexual orientation. If it says male and female, you understand? Man can also, because man is also seen, it depends how you see it. But these can be sexual orientations, positions of sexual orientations. Now, in the position of the sexual orientation, as we see here in Ephesians, so the man is the one, is the head of the house. He shall leave his mother and father. But here, if you read here in verse 11, and how you have left your father and your mother. This is very strange, because she, although she is the female position, all right, she has done what the man is, what Paul writes about the man. And this is why it makes it so strange and intricate to me, because here's a Gentile woman performing the position of a male for Israel, and coming to Israel. So she went from her nation and her gods and everything, and she went to the God of Israel. And she performed the manly position, but yet she's a woman. So she became the head of her house, as Paul says, the man is the head of the house, but she's like the church in being the woman. So you can go and see, you can make your own assumptions on that. This mystery is profound. I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. All right. But anyway, that just interests me, that father and your mother, because Jesus does speak about that. Ruth 2:12, the Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. This is a natural thing for the Hebrew. He doesn't say, oh, I'm going to bless you. He says, may God bless you, the one whom we serve, because it's up to him to bless you now. You've put yourself in his arms. You've taken yourself out of the arms of your gods, Chemos and all those gods, and you've put yourself under the God of Israel. He will live up to his name. This is basically what Boaz he's saying to her. Then she said, I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, for you have comforted me and spoken kindly to your servant, though I am not one of your servants. And she reminds him, and he looks at her. She's obviously, the fix is in. She's seen the strangeness of the situation. She says, you have comforted me. At mealtime, Boaz said to her, "Come here and eat some bread and dip your morsel in the wine." So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed to her roasted grain, and she ate until she was satisfied, and she had some left over. Now this word, "and he passed," is she reached, he reached. That word is the word sabat, sepat. And this is seize with, equals to seize with the hand. Basically what it means is Boaz is personally serving her with his hands, as this is in the singular form. And this word only appears once in the Bible, and this is that place. Okay, Ruth 2:15. When she rose to glean, Boaz instructed his young men, saying, "Let her gleave even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her." The Hebrew is empathetic, even between the sheaves. It was unusual for a gleaner to be allowed to pick grain this close to the harvester. Ruth 2:16, and also pull out some from the bundles for her, and leave it for her to glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening. Then she beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. And she took it up and went into the city. Her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned. She also brought out and gave her what food she had left over after being satisfied. So she kept some of the food from what Boaz had given her. After she had been satisfied, she had some of that left over as well. Now, ephah is, what was it? It was 9 gallons or something. But this is in the dry. So they work it out at about 30 pounds of barley. It's enough for 5 days for both of them. And her mother-in-law said to her, "Where did you glean today? And where have you worked? Blessed be the man who took notice of you." So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, "The man's name with whom I work today is Boaz." Naomi quickly realized that, yeah, there's something fishy behind the scenes. There's a fix going on here. Naomi realizes the implication of what is going on here. As a good Jewish mother, she realizes, okay, there's something happening here. There's someone that's found her favor. And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, "May he be blessed by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." This, to me, the living and the dead, is very important. Naomi also said to her, "The man is close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." The goal is Boaz. He's connected with the concept of the kinsman redeemer. Notice her phrasing, not forsaking the living or the dead. Genesis 3:4. Then the serpent said to the woman, "You will not surely die." Why are we so interested in this story? See, the living and the dead here, you shall. That tells me people that are living and people that are dead. All right. The serpent said to the woman, Surely you will not die." She did die. Both of them died. They died spiritually unto God. Secondly, they died fleshly. Yeah, Naomi is speaking about a fleshly death. But if we look at that spiritually, this is a redeemer, someone who has come for the living and the dead. So, how are we going to work this out? All right. So Adam and Eve died spiritually. Adam died spiritually. Jesus is a kinsman of Adam. But he's a kinsman of Adam. Why? Because he didn't die. He rose from the dead. So he's a kinsman that takes the dead, that includes the dead and the living spiritually. So he's for both. He's for the Christian, who has given their life to Jesus. And for the non-Christian, he's a kingsman, because it's the seed of Adam. He comes from the seed of Adam. You see, the Jews would say Abraham, and if you look at all their the genealogy and that, it's Abraham to to Mary and that. But for us, for all man, including the Jews, it comes from Adam. That's why that makes that, to me, whose kindness has not forsaken the living and the dead. His kindness does not forsake. See, why we're so important, why we're so interested in the story is because we have a goal, a kingsman, redeemer, Jesus. We're not Jewish, but we come from Adam. Thus we get deeper perception of his role by understanding what is going on here. You're going to find a deeper perception of what happened and what happens with Jesus and what he performs. He performs all these roles here, but he performs them spiritually. This is the amazing fact. He performs them fleshly. The Israelites reject that, but spiritually he performs it for us because we are the dead. And he became our kingsman. You see, the living was Israel. See, Adam died, Jesus lived. And Ruth the Moabite said, besides, he said to me, you shall keep close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest. And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that you go out with this young woman, lest in another field you be assaulted. So she kept close to the young woman of Boaz, gleaming unto the end of the barley and the wheat harvest, and she lived with her mother-in-law. Now Naomi is coaching her, and she understands what this means. She has this sight of a Hebrew. In other words, she understands the Hebrew laws and knows what is to happen. But she has to coach Ruth to follow the law, or the law, not to really follow. She has to teach her about the law, so that Ruth is able to perform. So there are two stages: the barley harvest, which is around the time of the Feast of First Fruits, and it ends with the Feast of Weeks. The wheat harvest, which begins in the Feast of Weeks, and the wheat harvest is about 50 days after the barley harvest. That's what we know as the Shavuot. If you look on that calendar that I've done in the previous, it's the Shavuot, the Pentecost. So, the first fruits, we are the first fruits of Jesus. The wheat harvest is the Shavuot, is the Holy Spirit. That's at Pentecost, Acts 2. All right, so we've got these two feasts. The funny thing is, this feast, the Shavuot, is where they read this book, the book of Ruth. And it's the only place they eat leavened bread. It's only the week of feast. They eat leavened bread in this period, in the Feast of Weeks, because Shavuot falls within the Feast of Weeks. All right. So summarize chapter 2. Ruth appears in the field of Boaz. She's introduced by an unnamed servant. She finds favor on his field. Boaz is a kinsman of Elimelech, eligible to serve as kinsman redeemer, thus fulfilling two laws, the law of redemption and the law of the Levirate marriage. So let's just look. The law of redemption has to do with the land. Land was not sold as a title. You bought the use of the land. You could lease out the land, and if a relative was rich enough, he could step in and pay what was left in the lease contract. You can read about this in Leviticus 25. Now, if a sojourner or stranger close to you becomes rich, and one of your brethren who dwells by him becomes poor, and sells himself to the stranger or the sojourner. Now, that word himself is what he owns, the land. To the stranger or the sojourner close to him, or to a member of the stranger's family. After he is sold, he may be redeemed again. one of his brothers may redeem him, or his uncle or his uncle's son may redeem him, or anyone who is near of kin to him in his family may redeem him, or if he is able, he may redeem himself. Thus he shall reckon with him who bought him. The price of his release shall be according to the number of years, from the year that he was sold to him until the year of the Jubilee, every 50 years, 49 Sabbaths plus one. It shall be according to the time of the hire servant for him. If there are still many years remaining according to them, he shall repay the price of his redemption from the money which he has bought. So basically what they're saying is there's a 50-year period. And in that 50-year period, if you run out of money, you can lease one of your lands out, or you can lease yourself out as a slave. And then, so for 50 years, you had to work for that person, or that person was allowed to use you in your land. On the 50th year, it would revert back to you. So the price would be negotiated according to the 50 years, or the 49 years, because no one is stupid enough to pay for the last year that's going to revert back to you. So this is, but in that period, if something happens and you have a rich brother or cousin or whatever, they can come in and they can redeem you back. So they can pay whatever's left of that 50-year period, that contract, and redeem the land and you back. So, okay, if you read on, it's in Israel belongs to God. You see in chapter 55, for the children of Israel are servants to me. They are my servants. You must keep that in mind. They are already, Israel is God's. It is like God's bride, say. The Father. It's like the Father's bride. Just remember that. I brought him out of the land of Egypt. He brought him out of the land of Egypt. He didn't bring us out of the land of Egypt. He gave us a pathway to come out of the land of Egypt. But the Father brought them out of the land of Egypt, physically. All right. Now, there's this funny thing in Jeremiah. To understand the big picture of what is going on here, and it's to understand these laws. Because we get so mixed up, we think, like if you get to chapter 3 and you see what Ruth does, you would think that's a thing for prostitution and there was sex and all this thing. And there's nothing to do with that. It has absolutely nothing to do with that. Because if you understand these laws, you understand what's going on. There is things that happen or could have happened, but this is what makes the story so pure. Is its innocence. It's only us who invert it into sexual context. But the story is very innocent. And you're going to see as we go along that chapter 3 will become the most misunderstood chapter in our Bible. Because people misunderstand it because of these laws. You see, Jeremiah 25... Jeremiah, if you read Jeremiah 25, it's about Israel going into this captivity and what happens in it. And it's bad. The wrath of God, the cup that was thrown between the nations, and this was bitterness and how they killed each other and things like that. And this is all to happen. And Jeremiah knows this. But yet God has ordered him or told him to buy a piece of land. Jeremiah goes and buys the piece of land, knowing that he's going into captivity. He will not make it out of captivity. He knows he's going to die. But Jeremiah buys this piece of land, and the guys are brought together, and they all sit in there, and he writes a title deed in his name, Jeremiah, and It's sealed with 7 seals. And it's the scroll or parchment is placed in a fabric or whatever, and it's put in, it's dug under, usually where there's a tree or some symbol of a tree was usually on the highest place, and it was a symbol of where they would build the altar and stuff. But the under a tree, and they would bury this thing. And then years later, when that scroll, when the Israelites came back, then that title deed would be under that tree. And that scroll would be opened. But that scroll could not be opened unless it was a kinsman or family of Jeremiah. Say his sons, one of his sons. The heir to that, he would basically, his heirs to that could open their title deed. And they had to be able to open their title deed, they had to fulfill certain things. So you had to be a kinsman, or you had to be a family member, a son, direct son. If there wasn't a direct son, it would be the next son. You understand? They would work it out. They would have tables of their genealogy. So they would know who was the next in line. And he would be called. And it was only him who could open those seals. Those 7 seals. So on the outside of the scroll would be written what the things were, the conditions were, and then it was sealed, and inside would be the title deed. And it's this title deed that Jeremiah places under the tree that this book is speaking about. Because if you read Revelations 5, that's exactly what is happening. No one is found. John has gone up into heaven. There is a scroll with 7, it's been sealed 7 times. Monday, the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, seventh day. So it's sealed 7 times. It's got 7 seals on it. But no one is able to open those seals. What are those seals? God gave 6 days to Adam. And he said to him, on the 7th you shall rest. Or the 7th day was perfect. It was God rested. You understand? The 8th day, Adam falls into sin. But God said to him, you can have all of this. You look after it. The animals are under you. But as soon as he sins, that seal, that scroll, is reverted back to its original owner, which is the Father. Because the Adam defaulted. See, the land is never Adam's, it's God's. He has the right to lease it. God has given him the authority and the power over it. But as soon as he reverts from that, the seal goes back unto God, it gets sealed. So to get the ground back, what has to happen? A kinsman has to come. Someone who Naomi claims is living, not forsaken, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead. 2 nations, or one Israel and one Gentile. The living and the dead. This is what this title deed done. The 7 scrolls are actually, if you look at Ruth, when she comes with Naomi, she gives 7 things that she says. I will die where you die, I will go where you go, blah, 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 unto death do us part. 7 scrolls. She says 7 things. All these have to do with titles and deeds. And this is why this book is important to understand, so you can see what's going on in Revelations 5. Not some guy's funny, oh, this is what I think it is. The Bible tells us what it is. The answer is yeah. Because the title deeds, because of the way the story is thinged out, what a kinsman redeemer means, what the law of the Levirate marriage is, all this type of thing. You're going to see the very position of the older kinsman in the next chapter. The next part to understand is the Levirate marriage. So it's title deeds, which is the law of redemption, the title deeds. That's got to do with the law of redemption. We'll see that in chapter 4. But remember Jeremiah and what he does in chapter 4. In chapter 3, the next chapter we're going to see the Levirate marriage. The word lever is, in the Latin, I think it is husband's brother, basically. So if we read Deuteronomy 25, 5 to 10, you'll see what it says there. It says that if the husband dies, the woman she kept with him. She was of good faith. But she had no sons by that husband. The brother would come in and he would take her as marriage. And he would bear a son unto her, and that son would be named Elimelech, the God with us. You understand? That's why I say the names are very important, because he has to take on the name of the dead person. And what is the name of the dead person? Now, remember also that the name of the dead person is the Hebrew name. All right. So the name of the dead person is Elimelech. And Elimelech means God is my king. So we can look at that and we could see, so he has to take God is my king on. So that's what would happen. But there was 3 conditions this kinsman had to meet. He had to be a near kinsman. So we're going to see in the story, Boaz has an older brother. All right. And the older brother is first in line. And he has to meet 3 conditions. He has to be a near kinsman, which he is. He had to be able to perform. Now, that's not sexually. He had to be able to perform. If he has a wife and her son, you must go and read that part. When we get there, I'll show it to you. And he had to be willing. And he will tell you which one he cannot do. Now, if he didn't do it, then he had to give his shoe to Ruth. And to give someone your shoe in Israel was to show that you had shamed yourself. It was a thing of shame. All right, a symbol of shame. So what we've been through is the law of gleaming in chapter 2. So when we come into this land under the kinsman redeemer, how we fall into his favor is by gleaming. Then we become a Levirate marriage, although we're the foreigner, because Ruth is actually, there's 2 ways this can work, and you'll see that. And then there's a law of redemption. All right? So chapter 3 is a widely misunderstood chapter. When she approaches him, Boaz, at night, it's not to solicit sex like a prostitute. It's worse than that. All right? She is asking him to put his authority over her. The hem of an Israelite male is where his signature was. If you wanted to divorce a woman, you would take her garments. At the bottom would be your signature on it. You would tear that off. That was a sign that you wanted to divorce them. All right? So if he had no wife, then no woman would wear his signature. But his signature was there at the hem of his garment. So when she comes to him, she is proposing that he overshadow her with his garment. So he must take his authority, because she's asking him something, she's proposing something, and to show that he agrees, he takes his garment, his authority, and he overshadows her. So if we go to Jesus and we ask him for salvation, He takes the Holy Spirit, his garment, because it says in John 16:13, he will not speak of his own authority. Whose authority is he speaking of? Jesus. So he's taking the Holy Spirit and he's saying, yeah, is my authority. And he places it over us. So it's a picture of Jesus overcoursing us with the Holy Spirit to seal us. And that's why people get it so wrong, because they don't understand the background. She was asking him to cover her or overshadow her with his authority. She was asking for the baptism of the Holy Spirit in our lives, in what we see it as today. But this is all in the law of God, so it has to follow a fleshly route. So that's what we're going to get into next. And if we understand that, you can read chapter 3 and you can see if you catch it. But there's a lot that goes into that. How the barley, how it's been laid out, the threshing floor, everything like that. Everything has a significance. Every title, every word, every dot, every comma has a significance to the positioning and the picture of what Jesus is doing for us. So thank you for listening and bless you in Jesus'